As you know, Reaper gets a ton of updates regularly, and even though Reaper blog does a great job doing all of the every single release update video, I took it my own way and I'm trying to make some sort of the biggest things for me across many updates. So today we will be talking about many Reaper updates from 7.21 to 7.29. So straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and let's just look at all of the updates that we have had. There were a ton of updates, so for it to be easier for us to follow, because there are way too many, I read every single one. I started making some organization across all of the different kind of updates. You don't have to be on the latest version every single time. I usually wait a couple of versions until I update. Some people have reported that they might get some issues. It usually isn't a problem, but if you're scared of that, just wait it out. It's fine. But let's talk about the updates. All of these lists will be also in the description down below. And of course, I will have some sort of timestamps, but not for every single thing. Regarding the batch converter, that is something that I've talked about in Reaper that you can find under the menu File and Batch File Item Converter, and it's an easy way to handle your sample library. I will link the video of that in the description. We have a couple of updates. Add checkbox to disable all normalize limit faith trim path setting. This is super useful and it's located right here in the window, and this wasn't on. So I always had to go in and check that everything was off or everything was on. But now you can just turn everything on and off from this part right here. And then also on the batch converter, it supports both imploding and exploding channels, many input files to one multi-channel output file, or one multi-channel input file to many single channel output files. This is really useful because sometimes when I receive multi-tracks, I know that users from different DOS usually don't necessarily deal with this or don't necessarily make all mono tracks mono and all stereo tracks stereo. It might be better to deal with, in certain situations, with only mono tracks. So for example, if I'm dealing with this multi-track that isn't so big and I just load it into the batch item converter and I want to start working with it normalized at everything at -9 peak, because that's the way I do gain staging, like whatever number you use, it doesn't matter. I now have this option where instead of setting the output to the source or mono or stereo, I can explode the tracks that are stereo originally. So if I load them into Reaper, so I know this project was made on Ableton Live, and as you can see, all of the tracks are for some reason stereo, and some people do take a moment and again export whatever's mono, whatever's stereo. But now we can finally do this. I would usually start exploding many of these things. You can do it inside of Reaper, exploding using the action explode multi-channel audio. But if you're trying to deal with file management, that's what the batch converter is. It's batch, it's a whole group of things. It could be a great option to do it from here, especially if you're receiving files from another DAW. It could be useful. And again, the same thing, like just exploding. On the render window, now we have wildcards at $lane wildcard, supported by rendering metadata and batch converter. That's a fantastic idea because I have talked about, I made a video recently on how to record demos on a single session and then how to make an export of that. But remember that whenever you're recording different takes in one single channel, what will probably end up happening is that whenever you're trying to edit this and you're switching from takes into lanes, instead of exporting a comp, if you just want to export all of the takes or lanes in this case, you will have under the wildcards menu, under media item information, under lane, and now we can call these vocals lane, and let's just put this somewhere where it really doesn't matter. So for this to be useful is you have to set up your recording or switch your takes into lanes. And on the render to file window, you have to select first all of the media items that you want to export with that specific information, right? And you have to have selected media items on the source. This will output 7 files that, as you can see, are numbered one after the other. So whenever I do this render and I open the folder so I can see them, it's right there. This could be useful for making small stems of takes. So you have like clean takes if you like working in different tracks instead of, I don't know, like it could be useful if you're delivering to someone else and not staying into Reaper as well. I feel that's useful. Render, clicking render picks display set edit in cursor project. Again, I like this idea. Because let's suppose for a moment that we have this whole track and I am rendering this and I have any given name for it and I just render it. If you're using to find some information of the dynamics of your track, this part of the analyzer with the true peaks, the momentary loops and the short loops, it's a great option. Remember that you don't have to close this window to keep working in the back. So you can just go into your highest peak, find it, maybe leave a marker here, and keep on working. Like, that's really useful. And on that note, render, right-click, render peaks display to insert project marker or create project region. So again, this is a great idea because you can start creating project markers and leaving yourself notes of whatever. If I select a time and I insert a project region and I say region, it's going to show up in my project. That goes along with creating time selection in render peaks display. And if you're looking at, for whatever reason, you're just looking at the numbers of your loops whenever you're delivering a mastering project, you can shade out the areas that are not giving any extra information added to those loops measurements. So it's not part of the equation, right? So you don't have to worry about those really low lows. They are not making your song softer just because. And again, they are just numbers. Topic, we will talk about media items. And let's talk about normalize, add preference for normalizing actions to apply to all takes within a media item. Again, if you're doing some sort of recording and you are just taking different takes because you need them for your song and blah, 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 blah. When you have all of your different takes, you can normalize selected takes, because if you only run the normalize media items, even if you have all of the takes selected, because remember that in Reaper, a media item can contain many takes. So it's a whole media item that contains many takes, but it will only normalize the selected take. That's why, or the active take. That's why whenever I switch takes, I can do this and I can do every single one by one. But now we have the action to normalize takes. And let's call it -3. Okay. And there we go, right? This option of normalizing items separately to the loudest item or as if they were one long item is also a good idea, because if you have all of these different media items across a single track, what you can do is normalize to loudest item. That's going to take the loudest media item in the track and pull everyone else to that level. And if you use normalize as if one long item, it's going to apply this normalization kind, as in true peak or loudness, and it will make it that. This is a small fix from the React script where you can copy your track take effects properly with the automation. This was like a small thing that that happened from time to time, but it's finally there. Now, recording restore behavior of adding takes when auto-punching selected items, not adding lanes, and new recording adds media items. If we check the post inside of the forum, we'll see that precisely. There was an update where the auto-punching records into a single item weren't overlapping properly, and now it's back to the previous behavior from the update 7.17. So now auto punching should add takes again. If that was a thing that was bothering you, it's fixed. On the Explorer, now we have paste as new takes, supporting pasting folders. This seems useful enough because, for example, if you're trying to do some more sample-based music, and let's suppose that you're working in this track and you have a snare, and now I will go into my sample library and I will load snares, and I am trying to find a proper snare, or I'm trying to switch between different samples that I have available, I can just right-click here and insert in selected media items as new take. If I don't have any media item on my project, it won't insert it anywhere. If I have a MIDI item, I can insert them as a new take. And remember that the media item can contain also a MIDI clip, and I can just delete it afterwards. So now I have all of these samples or loops. And this has to do, or I think this is also an interesting way of working around a recent video that I did on bringing some arrangement techniques from Ableton Live into Reaper, where now if you have different takes that are properly warped and are properly looped inside of your Reaper project, now you could just like cut in different places and start shifting the groove across different parts of your track, doing something like this. And this is a fast way of making an arrangement happen. But go look at the full video. I will link it in the description. On the peaks menu now, we have supporting displaying any two spectrogram, spectral peaks, and loudness graph at the same time. So if I have this track that I sent mastered already and everything, and I go into my peak display settings, it can display any two spectrogram, spectral peaks, and loudness graphs at the same time. We have all of the combinations now here. You can switch between any combination of those that you might want, that you might use. I think that if you're reading the LUFS graphs, you probably don't need spectral peaks because those lines will get lost in it. In any case, I would even go and switch the color of the track to black so I could take a big view, big overview of the loudness of the media item or the track itself. So I can just have a small reference. But see, if you go into spectral peaks, like you will lose it completely. And now you can control both of them at the same time. The spectral peaks, I can make them darker if I want to have them, and that's easier to read, you know. And I have my loudness analysis on the bottom, or any combination that you might think of. The peaks improve an appearance on loudness graph when zoomed in. That's also useful. Now I'm not looking at spectral peaks, I'm looking at loudness, right? So whenever I go closer, I have a much better view of it. Or even if I'm looking at the graph alone and I zoom in, it's not as buggy as it was before. And the support opacity control for the loudness graph. On the routing options, we have an add option to add sequential hardware outputs for selected tracks when right-clicking input-output button on TC on track control panel and mixer control panel. I think this one is really useful, especially if you're working with something like playback or any kind of sequencing that you need different physical outputs from your mixer audio interface or whatever. Now I can right-click on this icon, that's the blue, the orange, and the yellow, that remember if you're looking at the default theme, it looks like this. But now we have add sequential mono hardware outputs for these tracks. So I will go this way, and now they are properly made. The thing is that they are not disabled from the master send track. So you will have everything here going out through 1 and 2, and you will have these 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10. So I would just select all of the tracks and disable the master track send. So this is not working, and you have all of the control right here and in these knobs. And depending on the theme that you use, it might actually say I/O, inputs, outputs, or it might have any different version of that look. Most of the times you will have to look for these 3 icons. that show the master send track, the send on, or the receiving from somewhere else. There are a ton of other small details on the update. Go check Reaper blog videos for that. On automation, you can resize the handles of the automations, on the automation envelopes. You can do a ton of other things, but I think this is a small perspective on some of the new things that you can do that I think are like easy to just go into it and add them or remove them from your workflow, or if something changed the way it was working and now it's back, and you know what I mean. And last but not least, for those who are working with some synchronization systems, we now have under the action list, insert timecode generator. If I run and close this, now I have this small media item, and I'm going to turn my volume down. So when I play it, you will see that I have something coming out of this. Timecode is something that we use to synchronize, especially when you're working in film with video, or with live shows if you're working with lights and you're working with different things. This timecode generator is super long, so you can just extend it as far as you want. Remember that you can synchronize Reaper with external timecode, or if you're using Reaper as a timecode generator. And timecode usually uses this: hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. This will be the timecode generation. So as you can see, whenever I move my cursor, it's actually moving this reference right here. But this timecode generator will match wherever I am in my session. And I can send audio from it by double-clicking it or sending MIDI. I can vary the frame rates because this is really important. Be sure to check it out. And whenever the timecode media item starts or the timecode item starts, you can change where the start time goes. So if you're doing, again, some sort of live show or whatever, and you are doing different shows, or you're syncing to any other lighting video synchronization project, you can just set this to hour 1, hour 2, and hour 3. Since you have no visual reference of this, I might suggest that you might add take markers. So this is hour 1, and let's call this track 1. And do that with every single one of those. So you have some visual information of what's going on in your project, so you never skip a beat. Perfect. It's as easy as that. You could also combine this, like this is small extra things. Let's suppose that you want to stop the transport whenever you reach the end of the region, instead of having to double click this and stopping if the loop is enabled and doing like some strange combinations of that. You can just right click this action, copy the action command ID, go set the cursor at the end of the region, add a marker, add an exclamation point, add that command ID that you just copied, set OK. And now whenever your playback is running, it's going to stop whenever it reaches that command. And since that command is exactly the same, 444, you can just do it once and copy it at the end of every single region, and it's as easy as that. Down below, I have a link to buy me a coffee if you want to support my videos and support my channel. If you like this kind of videos, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And go watch everyone else in the Reaper Squad because everyone is doing great content. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.